Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another installment of our pupil guest interview series. It's been a minute since we had one of these interviews with all the things going on in the world and COVID, but we're happy to bring to you another interview. And in my judgment, this is one of the most significant figures in our state in the area of public interest law. In fact, perhaps the most significant figure in our state, Attorney General Kwame Raoul, who is kind enough to join us tonight and talk a little bit about his career and his experience in the field of public interest law. So we thank the Attorney General for joining us. And I'll provide a brief introduction of General Raoul in just a moment. But I want to start by just reminding everybody about the PUPIL mission statement and what it is that we're really set out to do with this project. And the mission statement and all this information that I'm going to read is available on our Facebook page, which is at Sangamon Pupil on Facebook, so you can find it there. The PUPIL mission statement is that the Pupil Network will encourage and facilitate the pursuit of careers in public interest law by Sangamon County high school and college students to promote unity, diversity, and community engagement. We will accomplish these objectives through collaborative educational opportunities, networking, mentorship, and other initiatives. We live in a time that calls for each of us to proactively identify opportunities to promote unity, mutual understanding, and cooperative action to positively impact the lives of all people in our community. PUPIL is designed to convene a broad spectrum of stakeholders and encourage young people to learn about how a career in public interest law can make a profound and lasting impact on the well-being of others and the cause of justice. So part of our PUPIL project is having a series of guest interviews. And what we hope to do once our community opens up where we can have in-person events, we intend to do that with schools in our area. But in the environment in which we live now, the best way to do some outreach is through these interviews. So we're, again, very grateful for Attorney General Raoul for being with us today. And I want to just make a good faith effort to introduce Attorney General Raoul. It will be undoubtedly insufficient because of his broad accomplishments in the field of law, not just public interest law, and we can talk a little bit about that too. But Attorney General Raoul was sworn in as the 42nd Attorney General of Illinois in January 2019. He was born in Chicago to Haitian immigrants. Attorney General Raoul brings a lifetime of legal and policy experience, advocacy, and public service to the Office of Attorney General. Attorney General Raoul is the state's chief legal and law enforcement officer, and clearly has demonstrated over his career a commitment to protecting Illinois residents by leading what we call the People's Law Firm, the Office of the Attorney General. He's initiated efforts to provide aid to those impacted by violence, defend the rights of workers, and protect consumers from scams, especially throughout the COVID-19 global pandemic. In addition to those community efforts, Attorney General Raoul is focused on enhancing collaboration between the Attorney General's office and federal and local law enforcement agencies. I can attest to that personally as Sangamon County State's Attorney. I can't possibly begin to recount all the instances where our offices have collaborated for the good of the public in so many different areas. And that's not unique to Sangamon County. Across the state, Attorney General Raoul's office is such an active and impactful partner in the work that we do on behalf of the citizens of the county that we represent across the state. Attorney General Raoul leads the Illinois Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, or ICAC, which engages in joint investigations and prosecutions to combat crimes that victimize children through the use of technology. Before he was elected as Attorney General in November 2018, Attorney General Raoul spent 14 years as a state senator in Illinois representing the 13th legislative district. He began his career as a prosecutor in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, and after that was an attorney for the City Colleges of Chicago, primarily handling labor and employment matters. But he was also a partner at two national law firms serving in healthcare and labor and employment practice groups, and perhaps the most important position in Attorney General Raoul's life is his status as a husband and father, married to Dr. Lisa Moore, and they are parents of four wonderful children. So Attorney General Raoul, thank you again so much for being here. I just wanted to cover a little bit about the work of the Attorney General's office. And you know much better than I, but I wanted to just give a little bit of a summary. Of course, the Attorney General is the state's chief legal officer and responsible for protecting the public interest of the state and its people. The job of the Attorney General is to advocate on behalf of all the people of Illinois, legislate with members of the General Assembly for new laws, and litigate to ensure state laws are followed and respected. And that summary comes from the Attorney General's website. If you're interested in checking that out, it's www.illinoisattorneygeneral.gov. Additionally, much of the work of the Attorney General's office focuses on protecting consumers, advocating for women, older citizens, and children, and protecting civil, labor, employment, disability, and veterans' rights, and defending our environment. Helping crime victims, ensuring open and honest government through the Freedom of Information Act and the Open Meetings Act, in addition to working with charities to make sure that those organizations have the tools that they need to follow the law and, of course, in turn, help those in need. So the work of the Attorney General's office is absolutely critical to preserving the rights of the citizens of the state of Illinois. And General Raoul, thank you again for being here. And we typically ask our guests a series of regular questions about their experience in the field of public interest law. And we first start just very general. What is public interest law, just fundamentally? And the Random House Dictionary defines public interest as the welfare or well-being of the general public. General Raoul, how would you define public interest law in your own words?
Yeah, and thank you for having me, first of all, and thank you for the work you do with PUPIL. I think it's important to make sure that we train and encourage the next generation of leaders in the public interest. Defining public interest law to me is the representation of the underrepresented or the disadvantaged, and oftentimes the poor, and not to use those terms synonymously, because sometimes one is disadvantaged because they are economically disadvantaged, but sometimes they may not be economically disadvantaged, but relatively so they may be. So whether it's representing somebody in an antitrust matter, for example, representing the public at large in antitrust, well, we'd be representing the interest of many people who certainly have means, but don't have means to take on a major corporation that's moving towards a monopoly that may be disadvantaged, that may disadvantage the public at large. So oftentimes it is representing individuals who are financially unable to get a lawyer on their own, or representing sectors of the public that are similarly disadvantaged with regards to getting legal representation. But oftentimes it's representing the public at large against major entities. Another area where I can think of that is utilities, representing ratepayers to make sure that the utility companies don't take advantage of the ratepayers too much. So that would be sort of my broad description of what is public interest law.
Absolutely. Excellent explanation. I couldn't agree more. So looking back in your career and your life before you reached the position in which you now serve, do you recall any person or issue or event that inspired you to pursue a career in public interest law?
Well, this is going to sound like the classic answer that everybody gives. They point to their parents,
Of course.
and I point to my parents, notwithstanding the fact that neither of them were lawyers. My father was a physician, actually, and my parents were both Haitian immigrants. And my father trained in New York and then settled to practice in Chicago, where he practiced on the south side of Chicago in disadvantaged neighborhoods, and often came home with a fruitcake or a block of cheese because he refused to reject a patient because of for their inability to pay. So he believed in that access to healthcare, and so while I wasn't strong in the sciences, pursuing a career in law and the public interest law in particular allowed me to advocate for that same access to healthcare that my father provided for folks on the south side of Chicago for 30 years. On my mother's side, my mother was a very devout Catholic, and my middle name is Eve. And she told me, my mother passed away about 6 months after I was sworn in as Attorney General. And she told me before she died that she would pray the prayer of Saint Eve for me every night. And Saint Eve was the saint of the advocates. And so my mother was kind of prescient because, you know, and if you allow me to, I carry her prayer card, and which has the prayer of Saint Eve. And I'll just read if you allow me to, you know, take me a minute. But it says, Saint Eve, when you lived among us, you were the advocate of the poor, the defender of widows and orphans, provider for all the needy. Listen today to our prayer. Help us to love justice as you loved it. Help us to know how to defend our rights without prejudice to others, and seeking above all reconciliation and peace. Rouse up defenders to plead the case of the oppressed so that justice may be done in love. Now, my mother was saying this prayer for me when I was a little baby, not knowing that I was going to pursue a career in law and the public interest law at that. So it's quite prescient that she would say this prayer. So I carry the prayer card every day with me wherever I go to remind me that I was set on this mission long ago by my mother. Finally, in terms of event that would have led me to practicing public interest law, I think about the fact when I actually went to law school, to be honest with you, I thought I was going to become a sports and entertainment lawyer. And I thought I was going to be an agent and representing athletes and/or entertainers. And, you know, there were occurrences that happened during law school that started impacting my decision-making. One was, you know, the beating of Rodney King in California. That was probably one of the first sort of individual videos that was released to the public that led to the same type of protest we've seen in recent years, most certainly over the course of the last year. And then the Career Planning and Placement Office put this interview with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office on my schedule, and I said, I didn't sign up for this. I don't want to go to the State's Attorney's Office. They said, well, take the interview as a mock interview. And so I did that, and so I was really relaxed because I didn't want the job. And so I did well in the interview because I wasn't nervous. And they called me back for a second, and I still didn't want the job, and so I was relaxed there. And by the time my third and final interview came around, I realized that I didn't have any other offers kind of pending, and I really needed the job. And so I ended up going in the state's attorney's office, and there was one assignment that I think impacted me above all is my time in serving in juvenile court, both on the delinquency side as well as the child protection side, because you became aware of every sort of human service deficiency that many of the either the minor respondents who came in after having committed a crime, or whether they were coming in as a result of abuse and neglect, you became aware of the kind of root causes of why people were screened into the system. And that tenure in juvenile court probably impacted me more than anything else prior to me joining the General Assembly.
Excellent. Thank you very much. How can young people draw upon their own life experiences to recognize the impact public interest law can have on our community?
Yeah, I think you know, the experiences that you begin to have when you're very young, you know, every experience you have, you've got to reflect upon it, because it can impact your perspective on what you do professionally way later in life. I say that, a friend of mine recently posted something on social media, a question on Facebook, and he asked the question, how old were you when a police officer first pointed the gun at you? And I was actually able to answer that question. I said 17. And, I was this kid running down the street trying to catch up to a friend with a car because, I didn't have a car. And somebody had been mugged a block and a half away. And so I'm running in the opposite direction. Cop car comes up and pulls a gun out on me and a friend. And, I'm scared, out of my wits. Now, naturally, the cop was responding to an actual mugging that had taken place not too far away, and we were running in the opposite direction. And later in life, when I started doing criminal appeals, I started reflecting upon, wow, what if we had been identified? What if there had been a false identification? Because we were brought back to the scene. I learned in my appellate law practice with the state's attorney's office that, fleeing the scene of a crime and being identified shortly thereafter is the strongest evidence to overcome any question of beyond a reasonable doubt. He said my life could have been changed from an event that I had nothing to do with, and so that's. Having had that experience and relating to those experiences that you have along the way, can impact your vision, and certainly impacts mine as a prosecutor, as to my responsibility to make sure we do everything we can do to get it right. Justice is about seeking out truth, and but for some fortuity, I could have been amongst the wrongfully convicted if for some reason those victims had mistaken me for the true perpetrators of that crime. So I think it's important for everybody to draw upon their personal experiences. I also think that it's critically important, particularly for young people these days who are impacted by these handheld devices and get so much information and communicate, on whether it's Twitter or Snapchat or whatever the social media platforms, in very brief clauses, not even full sentences, and so the patience for information is limited, right? You used to get sound bites. It's important. Sorry, we lost connection. It's important, I think, for us to, for young people in particular, but not just young people, I think all people, to learn to be more patient with those who may have an opposite opinion than we do, and to learn to seek reliable information, because there's so much misinformation that's communicated, particularly now that most people, as my children inform me, they tell me, Dad, we don't get the news the way you get the news. We get our news from social media. It's a lot more reliable. Well, not all the time, right? Certainly our access to the internet gives us tools to seek out information, but there's a lot of misinformation as well. And so I think it's important for us to teach patience in information gathering as you form your opinions and you develop your critical thinking skills in these formative years.
I agree. That's such good advice. And we often talk about how, when we talk to young people, about if you identify a condition in your community that inspires you toward action, whether that be, being an informed, active citizen, participating in, local efforts to improve conditions that you observe in your community. What young people don't often think about is long-term impact that they can have through a career, whether it be in public interest law or any other kind of career that can impact the community. But part of interviews like this and our efforts in PUPIL overall really are designed to give young people a glimpse into the impact they can have on a long-term basis through a career in public interest law, like you've done so successfully in your career. For those that are interested in law school but aren't sure how to prepare, what advice would you give them?
Read and write. It sounds so simple, but
so true.
I often say that in my junior year of high school, there were two directions one could go in. You could take electives on different English courses that you could take by quarter, or you could take a year-long reading and composition course. I was directed towards the year-long reading and composition course, and at the time, you get teased about that, and it seemed remedial and so forth. But I can tell you that the name Darlene McCampbell, who was my English teacher that junior year, taught me how to read and write. Of course, I learned how to read and write before then, but she taught me how to read interpretively and analytically and write persuasively in a way that I didn't really grasp those first 2 years of high school. And it's look for the teacher along the way that's going to take the time to do that with you. I went back to her when I was applying to law school, and I asked her to proofread my personal statement, and she had an essay that she had saved that I had written in the high school, and she shared it with me. And strangely enough, one of my classmates in high school was Arnie Duncan, the former Secretary of Education, and he has listed Darlene McCampbell as his favorite teacher of all time as well. So, really appreciating reading for comprehension, not just to consume a bunch of pages. I'm a very slow reader, which turned out to be an advantage for me in law school and thereafter, because I read very carefully. It may take me longer, but I read very carefully. And those who that I may have competed against in law school or otherwise that read quickly sometimes miss the nuances that could be caught in a paragraph or in a sentence even.
Excellent. That's great advice. And I think, oftentimes students think that, well, if I want to go to law school, I must major in history or poli-sci, or I must be an English major. How have you found that in your career, or the experiences that you've had?
Yeah, no, I think I've experienced lawyers who came from different backgrounds in terms of what they studied as undergraduates. I've got an one of my top environmental lawyers in the office used to be with the rock band for a while before he decided to go to law school. And he's a great, he's one of our best environmental lawyers. So you can come from all backgrounds. I was poli-sci, but really I started out as a undeclared engineering major. I thought about computer science. I bounced around from major to major, and I just kind of organically ended up in poli-sci, and thereafter said, well, I might as well go to law school. But it wasn't part of a plan at the outset to go to law school. So those who think that you've got to study something specific, whether it's history or poli-sci or English, in order to be successful in law school, that's not necessarily the case at all.
I totally agree. That was my experience as well. I majored in poli-sci, and when I went to law school, it was really cool to see that there were people from all different disciplines. I mean, chemistry, majors in undergrad or engineering, etc. But the key, as you said, is coming from a background where you've really tried to hone your study skills of, critical analysis and reading, and writing. In law school, that really is the key measure of success, is having those kind of study skills and commitment to being able to get through all the material. And I too am a slow reader, but I agree that reading carefully can often be an asset, especially in our work. So, well, Attorney General Raoul, thank you again so sincerely for taking the time. Learned a lot about you as a person, also as our Attorney General. And I know that those that are going to be watching this are going to be genuinely appreciative of everything that you've had to say, and for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to be with us. So I thank you very, very much, and have a wonderful evening.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.